Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network, presented by FanDuel. And joining me to look at the Rockets Thunder opening night double OT classic, USA Today Rockets Wires host of the Loggerline podcast and Sports Talk 790's Ben DuBose. Huge title, but he's doing all sorts of things. Great to see you, Ben. And man, it's rare where you see something that's an immediate season game changer on opening night. But Ben, the glaring in bold headline for me on this one was Alperen Sengun Curry, 10 of 11 from the free throw line, 5 of 8 from three, firing threes up like this was practice. Even though the NBC broadcast crew had no idea, no clue that this was a big deal, Ben, this is massive.
Yeah, if he's able to hit threes at volume, it completely changes the complexion of what they're able to do offensively, especially because most teams you play aren't going to be able to ball pressure to the extent that the Thunder did. So I think you can lean into things like bringing the ball up the court with Sengun even more and potentially letting him just clear out and make a play. And sometimes that's going to be walking into a three. It's tough to do that the way the Thunder defend, but I get the frustrations with the offense, especially in the absence of Fred VanVleet not having a point guard. But I will say a lot of the issues, look, the Rockets played the best team defensively in the NBA last season. Well, the best NBA team, period. And then the last time we saw the Rockets, it was 7 hard-fought games against the Warriors, who are excellent on that side. You are eventually going to get to start playing some lesser teams again. And I think, the offense will be a little bit more free-flowing when that happens. And it starts with Sengun, because if he can not just be a low post hub, but actually generate his own offense, one-on-one situations from the top, if he can rise and fire from anywhere. And Robert, what stood out to me the most, it wasn't just that he made threes. A lot of those threes were 26, 27 feet. He was 2 or 3 steps beyond the three-point line. So in terms of spacing and, the big play that he had getting Chet into foul trouble, and Chet officially fouled out, I think, in overtime. But it was late in the third quarter, and Chet closed out on Sengun from, I think, 26, 27 feet because he had made a couple. And that's where, Sengun got to the mid-range and Chet reached in, and that was the and one. Yeah, if Sengun can do that, or even a fraction of that from three-point range, then what that opens up for this team is just night and day compared to what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, one thing Rockets fans got to temper a little bit is they didn't have their second best player, Jalen Williams, the real Jalen Williams, not the fake Jalen Williams. So that played a part into it. But getting back to Sengun and what you're talking about with him, I mean, we're talking about last year, it's like they had cooties. They were so far away from him. But Sengun, there were plays, like you said, where, they're trying to close out. They're taking him seriously, and he's still firing away like this is like what I'm supposed to do. And I mean, what do you think about this, Ben? I looked at the FanDuel odds for most improved player. They've got Sengun plus 6,000. That's 60-1. Amen's actually the favorite plus 700. Reed's plus 3,000. Jabari is tied with Sengun at plus 6,000. But I don't know about you, Ben, but you could bet on Amen, but what about a fun hedge with Sengun? What if he's all NBA? This is all on the table.
See, I think Sengun possibly could be the most improved player if you're looking at it strictly through the lens of, actual improvements from last year to this year. But in terms of who's going to win the award, I doubt it, simply because with Sengun getting the All-Star nomination last year, I have a tough time seeing him have the juice unless he's legitimately top 10 player in the league good, which maybe he is. I mean, he was a top 10 player last night, that's for sure. But I still lean to Amen or Jabari being better candidates simply because from a narrative perspective, there's more of a jump that they can take. But yeah, Sengun, in terms of legitimately how much he's improved between seasons, it's significant. And I love that you mentioned the free throws, because if the three-point shooting is combined with a bump from the free throw line, it is much more believable that he's actually made improvements to his touch, to his form. If the free throws are still hovering in the upper 60s to 70% range, the way they've been the last couple of years, then it's easier to sort of say, hey, he's just hot from three and he's eventually going to revert back to career norms. But if all of a sudden he's making free throws at an 80+% rate and the threes are going in, then it's much more believable that, hey, like this isn't just a small sample size, that he's legitimately, changed who he is as a shooter. And if he has, then it completely changes the totality of what he can provide on offense.
Yeah, you talk about opening day games and what did I just see moments like Sengun had it. It felt the same as when James Harden showed up in his first Rockets game, 37-12 against the Pistons. Now, the second huge storyline that I took with this one, with long-term ramifications, which I mentioned could be big in last week's show, 27 of 31 for the team from the free throw line. This was the worst free throw shooting team in the NBA last year, but I kept pointing out it was two guys, Sengun and Amen. They were 12 for 13 in this game. It's unfortunate the Durant miss in the final minute was the free throw focus. And hey, Adams and Capella aren't going to go 4 for 4 most nights, but it's not just that Amen and Sengun made them bend. They did it in maybe the toughest environment in the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. On the road against a team and a crowd that is as dialed in as you will see in the regular season. Yeah, those were high pressure free throws. They did miss some in high leverage spots. You mentioned KD in the last 10 seconds, and then Reed and Sengun each had a miss in overtime. But I think a lot of what happened there, quite frankly, was fatigue. It's mid-October, and by the time you get 47 plus minutes and eventually to 53 and 58 minutes, I mean, tanks are on empty. And I think that's largely what happened in overtime. Overall, the 27 for 31 speaks for itself. And yeah, it's been a point of emphasis. We saw it in the preseason as well. I wrote about it at Rockets Wire. One of the big jumps when you look at last year's team, and free throws are something that, even if we're talking about preseason compared to regular season, I mean, it is an apples to apples. It's, can you go up to the line and make shots? And the Rockets were number one in free throws in preseason at 85%. Like, that's probably not sustainable, but being the best out of 30 teams after being the worst out of 30 teams a year ago, there's probably something to that. Like, I don't know if they're legitimately the best team in the league at it, but if they are even middle of the pack, then that's going to help so much, because yeah, the free throw line is where they left a lot of meat on the bone last year in some of those close losses.
And like I point out, it's two guys because you look at who's taking the free throws most of the time, and those were the two top, or I think they were two of the top three guys taking free throws. You also have to mention the fact that fatigue hurts you, and when SGA is going 7 for 11 from the free throw line, very un-SGA like, then that plays into. I mean, that was basically like a Sengun free throw line from last year, 7 for 11. I got a couple of minor disappointments, Ben, from opening night, but the major thing was Durant's bad moments down the stretch. I don't know if he was just doing a quiet tribute to Jalen and Dylan, but it wasn't just the missed free throw. He dribbled off his foot. He pulled the Chris Webber timeout thing, just got lucky the officials missed it. Thank you, officiating, for rare time with the Rockets. And I'm going to assume KD won't make these mistakes consistently. But Ben, I didn't understand Amen passing the ball to Sengun for that final shot over KD. Sengun was hot, but a turnaround buzzer beater isn't his specialty. Amen could have had KD in the same free throw extended spot if he threw it just a second earlier.
Yeah.
Isn't that a big reason why you get KD in the first place?
It should be, but I do wonder if KD might have been on fumes and the team knew it, because it wasn't just the missed free throw, as you said. He didn't move that much off the ball. There was that stat in overtime that he had 13 shot attempts in the first three quarters and then 1 in the fourth quarter, and at that time, overtime combined. And it's not just, the Rockets don't have a point guard and they need to feed him. No, I think some of it is a combination of he's not moving as much, and maybe his teammates pick up on that and see that, he's just didn't have it, at least not to ride him that heavily. Look at the turnover he had early in the first overtime, where it ended up leading to that Chet 3, and the Rockets played from down 4-6 points for most of that overtime. I mean, it was just a careless thing. And, then on the other end, there was just a very simple box out that he didn't do, and Cason Wallace kept the possession alive and ended up resulting in a Chet 3. Like there were all sorts of things, the missed free throw, the box out, the turnover. It just seemed like he was running on empty to some extent. And it's mid-October. He's 37 years old. He also had thumb surgery in the offseason, so I'm not 100% sure when he was cleared to fully resume all basketball activities. I tend to think that there's a physical connection there because it wasn't just one area. If you watch closely, he just wasn't making an impact in any phase down the stretch of that game and in overtime. And so that's what I hope as he gets his legs underneath him. And also, he did have to play 47 minutes last night because it goes 2 overtimes, and you're not going to take a guy that good out unless he fouls out when it's that high leverage. So hopefully as he gets in better condition and you're able to manage the minutes a little bit more, some of this stuff naturally resolves. Because I don't think it's as simple as the way some on social media framed it. Oh, his teammates have just got to get him more involved. No, he's got to get more involved himself.
Yeah, a couple of things on what you said. My fear was that Udoka was going to play him too many minutes, especially without Fred and what we saw him doing with Fred. He's 37 years old. He played 20 minutes in the first half, which I thought was too much, but he backed off in the second half, but then the bad luck of the double overtime. But also, to your point about him struggling at the end of the game, I mean, you got to give OKC credit. It's a terrible matchup with him and Lou Dort. Dort gets under him. He's physical. He was having a hard time getting the ball because Dort was being such a pest. And I'll get to Reed in a second. People can blame Reed Sheppard for having a tough time and not giving KD the best pass late in the game to KD on one possession. But, it's hard because Lou Dort and this defense, there's a reason why they were historically one of the best defenses of all time last year.
We should also note when it comes to the conditioning angle, Durant's not the only one. I mean, Thompson had issues with cramps and went out in overtime and never came back. I mean, hopefully he's fine and good to go for Friday. As of our recording, we're still waiting to hear more on that. But it did make sense from a Rockets perspective. The one guy who came into camp in the best shape was Alperen Sengun because of that Eurobasket run. And he was the guy whose legs seemed to hold up the best. So that's sort of the silver lining. It's not just KD. Across the board, it seemed like a lot of guys were running on fumes towards the end of that game. They asked Steven Adams to play 36 minutes. And not that Steven's ever going to be a super switchable guy, but in the overtimes, he was especially struggling. You could tell that he was, laboring and, really needed to get out, but there wasn't anyone else that Ime Udoka could specifically turn to, especially with Tari Eason struggling to the extent that he did. And I know we'll get to him later. The bottom line, they had to lean on Sengun as much as possible in that game. And I mean, the good news, he delivered. He gave them a chance to win. And one other thing we should mention with the free throw discussion that we had earlier, if there's no point guard, which there isn't in this configuration other than some Reed Sheppard. But one thing in the first half I worried about in that game was, how is Sengun going to get going if he doesn't have Fred VanVleet to run pick and roll with him? If he's able to shoot at that level, and if he's able to, get to the line, which happens inherently more when you're going one-on-one and you force guys to lean in the way Chet did a few times. If you can knock down the shots, if you can get to the free throw line and make those, then even if you don't have that pick and roll partner that can spoon feed you, then you're still going to be good enough to create offense. And that's what Sengun did in this game. And I thought the Rockets had to lean on him because, nobody else was really capable of stepping in. Like KD, you mentioned it's a rough matchup, but he also didn't seem to have a lot of juice. Amin had a couple of encouraging possessions in the fourth, but then the calf started going on him. Like the Rockets sort of had to ride Sengun because it felt like, and a lot of this is the defense. You have to give credit to Oklahoma City. They're really good, but who else was going to do it?
Yeah, I want to talk about the depth in just a second. But what do you guys out there? What do you listeners and viewers think? Let us know in the YouTube comments. If you missed our live Texans Seahawks postgame show with Jason Braddock and Tom Chavaria, find it on our live tab. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube with notifications so you could get updates on the live shows and all our content. Also, subscribe on your favorite podcast app. All right, Ben, minor disappointment number 2, Tari Eason starting off the season like he's making a Framber Valdez contract run. Not super concerned about one bad night from him, but have you heard anything about why the extension didn't happen? Any personal thoughts on that in particular?
Yeah, I just think the gap between what I consider the bull case and the bear case was just too wide. Because the bull case, look, like the tracking metrics love him. When you dig into the analytics, there are times that he looks like a quasi-star level player, at least in terms of impact. Now, can you scale it from a 25 minutes per game, 6-man to 30, 35 minutes playing against starters? I don't know. That's the question. But analytically, like, the models love him. And yet he's only played in 79 combined games the last 2 regular seasons, and not just because of bad luck. No, it's consistent issues with the same leg, the same issue. So it's not all randomness. No, there's a legitimate concern there. And he was also objectively, Robert, he was their worst rotation player in the playoffs last year. Like, the big concern with Tari is, can he execute in the half court? And especially against a team that has a disciplined point guard that can punish you if on the defensive end you're overly aggressive, trying to create chaos. We know the Terror Twins dynamic, and at least from a net ratings perspective, he was by far the worst of the 8 the Rockets consistently played in the playoffs against the Warriors. So the glass half full view and the glass half empty, it's so wide that, in a normal situation, if the vibes are good, and clearly they are, the culture of this team is very strong, then each side can give maybe 10%, and you're close enough to a deal that one can get done. As opposed to in these negotiations, I think both sides can give 10% and they're still not that close. And so it just sort of makes sense to wait until 2026 when you have more data points. You see if he stays healthy. You see how he plays in these high leverage games. Obviously, the Thunder opener was not a great one, but it is just one data point. He'll have plenty of other opportunities. It's been reported, Brian Windhorst on one of the ESPN podcasts Wednesday morning said that he heard the Rockets offer was over $100 million, but then he qualified that by saying that he heard there was some non-guaranteed money in there. And I think that's probably it. And that, the Rockets were trying to give him the best deal they could to sort of win the negotiations from a PR perspective to let Tari get that deal, but they weren't willing to fully guarantee all of it because of those inherent risks. And so I don't know where it goes from here, because there are a lot of teams that have cap space next summer. So there is a world where if he goes out and has a really good year, that he could sort of price you out from the standpoint of earning a contract that would take you beyond the second apron. And we know how crippling that can be in the modern NBA. It's just the Rockets feel like they sort of have to take that risk because he hasn't shown enough consistently to this point to where I think they feel comfortable saying, hey, we're going to give you $20 million a year or so in fully guaranteed money and lock that in. No, that's too risky. And, they'll see how he plays and pick up the discussion in 26. If it doesn't go that well, obviously he could be a trade candidate at the deadline. There's lots of ways this can play out, but the bottom line is just, it's too risky to give him a fully guaranteed deal at the annual value I think he was looking for, which is probably something around 20 or a little bit more.
Yeah, a couple of things on what you said. First of all, I think it's a big deal that a lot of guys from that particular draft didn't get an extension. So you go into next summer and guys are going to have room, or teams are going to have room. But if there's a bunch of them out there, it's probably not going to go well for Tari. We already saw the Kuminga saga play out the way it did this past summer. And that was with, not a bunch of guys out there. So I think that helps the Rockets.
Although there are more teams with cap space now.
Oh yeah. That'll play a part as well. Also, you talk about Tari and him not being all that great in the playoffs, and it showed you everything you needed to know that Tari wasn't the guy on SGA with Amen out of the game. It was Josh Okogie. I'll talk more about Okogie in a second, but that tells you kind of where Tari is as far as his defense goes. Another minor disappointment. This is my number 3 minor disappointment from the game. Now, this has got a little bit bigger ramifications than the Tari thing, but this is bigger because I beat this Reed Sheppard as a terrible defender drum since early last year, Ben. I said, don't fall for the optical illusion of his quick hands and occasional steals. He's blown, we know it. He's blown by consistently. He won't get taller. He's not going to get much stronger. He's not going to have bigger shoulders, wider base, all that sort of stuff. He's got to be elite offensively, like semi Steph Curry, not Curry, but close, Ben. I think you would want that before you'd want him on the floor in big playoff moments. This is something that is definitely a red flag for him.
The shooting just wasn't good enough. And I think what really stood out to me overall about this game, the Rockets outside of Alperen Sengun were 6 of 33 from three-point range, below 20%. Nobody could throw it in the ocean. And yeah, you're exactly right about Reed. To offset the obvious deficiencies with his lack of size and physicality, especially this young, he needs to be able to shoot. I mean, the glass half full view I can offer you, I actually thought he did a much better job than last year at getting to the right shots and putting up within the flow of the offense good looks. He just needs to make them. And to some extent, it applies to Tari as well. I mean, I think he went 1 of 4 from 3, and he missed a lot of his shots inside the arc as well. They were pretty good looks that they just didn't go down. And, to close the loop on Tari, I mean, I think it ties back into the same theme as the playoffs. The issue for him is making good reads and tough plays in the half court. And it felt like against the Thunder, it's not going to come easy. There's not going to be the chaos to feed off. So can you make your open threes? And when you drive to the basket, can you finish through contact? Can you finish at difficult angles? He just wasn't good enough in the half court. Like, I don't buy, I've seen some worry about Tari's, mentality after not getting the contract extension. No, I think he has a good head on his shoulders. I thought he played hard. I don't think he's going to, chalk, or I don't think he's going to pout. No, I think it just comes down to skill. And can he make plays in the half court against tough physical defenses? Last night he didn't, and it was an issue last year as well. There's still time that he can adjust, but to this point, that's the narrative of his career, and it's on him, especially if he wants to get a contract that's in the Jabari Smith range, 5 years, 120-ish million guaranteed, so over 20 million a year in average annual value locked in, then he's got to prove that he can do it. Jabari did it in the playoffs. Tari didn't. And with Reed, it's obviously a different archetype, but I think there's some similar themes here in that, look, against tough defenses, you've got to go out and just make some contested shots. The defensive limitations with his archetype speak for themselves. You're right to be concerned about that. But offensively, this was a guy that was billed as a generational shooter, and he got to spots. We talked last year about the Rockets needing to be much better in the mid-range at, scoring at all three levels. He did a good job of getting to that like 10 to 14 foot area and getting off some pretty clean looks. He just didn't make them. And he had some of those threes where, he moved off the ball and had space. They just didn't go in. He was 2 of 7 from 3. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. Like, those guys, there are some inherent deficiencies to their game. They just need to make enough shots to where they offset that. And against the Thunder, they didn't. That's the bottom line. Outside of Sengun, 6 of 33 as a team from 3. That's just not going to get it done.
Yeah, until he starts hitting these threes like they're automatic, like we saw in college, this 50% stuff. Until that starts to happen, I'm just going to be skeptical of, is he really that great a three-point shooter? Because, yeah, he shot 40% last night, but I need to see some games where he knocks down like 5 of 6. Like, the great shooters have those games where they just get red hot and they can't miss. I need to see stretches where he just can't miss.
The one silver lining I will throw out is that they should have Dorian Finney-Smith back in the not too distant future, and he shot 41+% from 3 last year. And they need it, because I think what stood out to me and what ties it all together, for me, the deficiencies with this team, it's less about a quote-unquote point guard. I know that will be the national narrative. It's more that whoever they throw out there as the fifth starter has clear flaws. With Tari and Reed, we've just been discussing them. With Steven Adams, like, obviously he's great when it comes to the offensive rebounding and the screen setting, but the spacing gets clunky, and obviously he's not a super switchable guy when it comes to a guy like SGA that's able to, get the defender, the big, switched onto him. No matter who they go to for that fifth spot, there are pluses, but there are minuses, and really good teams are gonna hunt the minuses and exploit those. My frustrations with Reed, a lot of people are saying, oh, could he have found KD more? I mean, maybe, but I'm not that focused on that, because as you said earlier, I think, the Thunder and Lou Dort specifically did a really good job of making it difficult to get KD the ball where he wanted and needed to get it. And I also think KD was sort of running on fumes late in that game. So for me, it's less about, oh, is Reed Sheppard a good enough point guard, or do the Rockets have a point guard? No, it's that they have 4 really good starters between KD, Sengun, Amen, and Jabari. Now, unfortunately, in the overtimes, they only had 3 because Amen went out with the cramps. Hopefully that's just a one-game issue, but time will tell. But I just think that be it Reed, be it Tari, be it Steven, all these guys have clear positives, but they also have clear negatives, and good teams are going to hunt those negatives. And so the way this team is built, their best chance internally at a guy who's well-rounded, that can be valuable defensively, but also provide value offensively as a floor spacer, is Dorian Finney-Smith. He's the guy that on paper can check the most boxes. Hopefully that will make a difference. If it doesn't, then yeah, you may have to look at the trade market by the time you get to February, because for me, that's what stood out about this game. The Rockets don't have, a fifth guy that they can consistently trust. It's not Reed, it's not Tari. Steven's certainly trying, but really good teams can sort of hunt out the double big deficiencies as well. And so how do you get a fifth starter that you can consistently rely upon? To me, that's the big question here.
Thompson, incredible down the stretch offensively at moments. And Ben, I just got to say this. Can somebody on the Rockets medical staff please give Amen a magnesium powder drink at halftime? This is back-to-back games, going back to game 7 in the playoffs. We've lost him because of cramping. And by the way, keep the Astros staff away from the Rockets.
No Jeremiah Randall. No, I'm not going to blame the staff on this one because it's game 1 of the season and they were playing insanely hard on the road against a good defense. So I tend to think a lot of it's just an occupational hazard. And a men's game in particular, the two-way aspects of it require a ton of physical exertion. And they probably made the right decision not to risk further injury. I'm guessing Jeremiah Randall, the same way he did with Chick Byers, probably would have said, go on out there. No, I think I came away very encouraged by men other than the calf issues. I thought, at times the last 2 years we've seen the creation potential, but the buckets he had late in the fourth quarter, one of the NBC guys, I forget if it was Reggie or Jamal Crawford, compared it to like a Penny Hardaway type spin. Those are plays you can't teach, and that's using your athleticism the right way. We know what he can do in transition, but the big question is, can he do enough as a ball handler to generate half-court offense himself against a really good defense and in high leverage moments where they were fully dialed in? He did. To me, there were at least 2, maybe 3 drives he had, just bully ball type moves in the fourth quarter. I thought that was really, really encouraging because the defense is always going to be there. We know he can handle. We know he can pass. This whole debate over, is he a point guard? I mean, to me, it's just missing the forest for the trees.
Did you notice, Ben, that the broadcast team was like, hey, why aren't they pressuring Amen coming up the court? And as soon as they said that, they pressured him and he just blew by them. And
they're going to be fine. Like, I thought it was so funny in the first quarter of the game, they were complaining about, this Rockets offense looks really sticky. They're struggling. They had 30 points and like only 2 turnovers. Now, I know it did become an issue as the game progressed, I think in part because the Thunder played harder, but I just think it always looks so awkward because you don't see many teams that are that big, one of the biggest starting lineups in NBA history, because it's so weird by the eye test and it goes against the whole 5-out phenomenon that's been NBA basketball in the last 5 to 10 years, that I think there's sometimes people that are sort of trying to tie it all into a one-size-fits-all narrative. Whereas they did a lot of good things, even if it looked unconventional. And like Amen, when he was healthy and he was able to, fully push off both of his legs, to me, he was fine. Like, I'm not worried about, do they have a point guard? That's why I keep going back to, do they have a 5th starter? That's the way I frame the concerns with this team, because I thought Amen last night was good. I mean, the only hole you can poke, he was 0 of 7 from 3, but I think Amen having a 3-point shot is a bonus. It's not necessarily a necessity when you're the athlete that he is. And I would also point out that the 0 of 7, most of those were short, and we know he was struggling with the calf. So I have a theory that, the shots that he missed, and also when he got a little bit hesitant taking the threes and he was open in the second half and guys were sagging off of him, I think when he's not able to, fully push off that leg and that leg is cramping, then you're even less likely to put up that 3 from 24 feet away. The threes are the only nitpick that you would have as far as how he ran the offense, what he did when the game was on the line. I thought it was a really good game, and that's why, to go back to your earlier question, I would have him near the front of the list for most improved player in the league.
Hey, we talked about Tari Eason might not want to have his personal data up from last night's game, but I do want to help you listeners worried about your personal data. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. What do data brokers do? Well, your name, contact info, security number, home address, even info about your family members could all be compiled by data brokers and sold online. But now you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. As someone with an active online presence, privacy, hey, it's super important to me, and I've had issues in the past, so I know the hassle you guys could go through. Have you ever been a victim of identity theft, harassment, doxing? If you haven't, you probably know somebody who has, but Delete Me can help. Take control of your data. Keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. We got a special discount too. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/HIT. Use promo code HIT at checkout. The only way to get that 20% off, go to joindeleteme.com/HIT and enter the code HIT at checkout. DeleteMe.com/hit, code HIT. Okay, Ben, can you believe how important Josh Okogie has become? I've called him the eighth man, and Finney-Smith actually gets healthy.
Yeah, I thought it was very noteworthy that he played ahead of Aaron Holiday, because if you trust Reed Sheppard and if you're committed to him, then in theory you have the ball handling and the shooting. So what you need is more size, and we know what Okogie can do defensively. I go back to his rookie season when he had a game against Harden during the Unguardable tour. That was one of the best individual defensive games that I think I've ever seen. When you look at a guy that has a 7-foot wingspan, yet has the fluidity to defend pretty much anybody on the perimeter, that's really valuable for a coach in Ime Udoka that wants to have a top 5 defense no matter what. And that's been, the big question. Like we talked in the preseason when the Rockets led the NBA in all of the relevant offensive categories, like they're going to be better offensively with Kevin Durant, but did they give up too much on the defensive end? Okogie's a guy who is very high floor. I thought it was noteworthy that he finished in place of Tari Eason in a number of high leverage situations late in the game and in overtimes. Like he's just very steady. In some ways you can compare him to Jae'Sean Tate, but he's a lot more athletic. He has a lot more explosion. The wingspan is bigger, I believe. I think he checks a lot of those Tate boxes that made Tate valuable in important spots here or there the last couple of years to Ime Udoka, but he has a little more upside now. He doesn't have as much upside as Tari Eason, and so that's where you're constantly trying to balance between, the steadiness and upside. But against a team as good as Oklahoma City, you couldn't afford to swing and miss at multiple spots. And so what I think ended up happening late in that game, you couldn't justify playing both Reed and Tari because they're so boom or bust. They're so hit or miss. And so it ended up being Reed a little bit more than Tari, but you can sort of take one home run swing, and then at the other spot, you need something that's steady and dependable. And that's what Josh Okogie is. You know what you're going to get from him. If you're going to be taking these home run swings elsewhere, then Okogie is really useful to give you a high floor guy that you can sort of plug and play in a lot of different rosters.
Any educated guesses on Finney-Smith's timetable? Are we talking 2 weeks, 2 months?
I think it should be 2 weeks. They expect Tate to be cleared by Friday. He went through a full contact practice last weekend. And as I understand it, Tate and Finney-Smith had the same ankle procedure in the offseason. So if Tate is back, and we haven't heard anything to think that Dorian's was any more complicated or that he's had any setbacks. So I wouldn't think it's more than a month at the absolute worst, because if the split between Tate and Dorian is more than a month, then something went wrong here. Either the surgery was more intense than we've been told, or there was some sort of setback. So if you take them at face value that they both had the same surgery, there's been no problems, and it's not like he's in hiding. Like he is a participant in practices partially. He's doing running drills. He's working with the staff. If you take them at face value that's the same procedure as Tate, then I think we're talking weeks rather than months.
Any final takeaways from this one? Just as an aside, I thought the officials did a fantastic job. I kind of noted that because, these are two teams that are tough to officiate, and there wasn't anything super egregious. I know obviously the OKC fans weren't happy with the Durant thing, but it's a wrestling match. These teams will almost foul you every single time. And, OKC, they play great defense, but they're physical. And so, yeah, I got to give them credit. Anything that you saw that we haven't mentioned?
It would have been a shame for that game to end on a KD Chris Webber, particularly because SGA had his attempt blocked at a game-winning shot. So just think about it. Like tie game, 8 seconds left, and SGA, the MVP of the league, has his shot blocked by Tari Eason. And then for the game to end because of a fluke, and it wasn't just KD, in fairness to him, Jabari and Sengun briefly motion for a timeout as well. For the game to end because it just landed in the lap of Kevin Durant, Lorenzo Charles style, with like 2 seconds before, and then he accidentally, called for a timeout when he didn't have one. That would have been an absolute shame for the game to end like that. Beyond any just Rockets homerism angles, which, I'll own. I think at least the way it ended up, as frustrating as it was for KD to commit that foul with 2.3 seconds left in double overtime with the Rockets up by 1, sending SGA to the line, at least it was decided by SGA going out there and making a play. Like it's what he does. He's really good at getting to the line. And as frustrating as it is, as a Rockets fan, in terms of being a consumer of the NBA product, a great game between two heavyweights. At least it was decided by, one of the best players in the league going out there and making a play. My biggest takeaway, in the immediate aftermath, it's frustrating because we spent the whole offseason talking about you brought in Kevin Durant as the closer. And there's been all this talk that like the last 4 or 5 years, KD's teams in games decided by 5 points or less have insanely good records relative to the league as a whole. And this game was decided in large part, KD owned it after the game. Like if you look at the post-game quotes, he said the 2 plays that he messed up on, the missed free throw late in regulation, and then the foul against SGA. He says that was the game. You don't have too many opportunities on the road against a great team. And that's probably right. And it's just frustrating because, hashtag Houston Sports, we talked all off season about you bring in the closer and had every opportunity to close the game. And he was the guy in a lot of these stretches that let you down. We also had the missed box out, the turnover early in overtime. And a lot of it may have been mental and physical fatigue, but regardless of the reason, he just didn't execute. And so that's frustrating. However, the biggest takeaway that I have is that even with those deficiencies, I thought overall they looked much better in clutch time this year at generating offense in the half court than they did last year. Even with Kevin making those mistakes between the Amin drives that we talked about, the Sengun buckets late in regulation and in overtime. Last year, if it was close and late, you were hoping for the Rockets to hang on for dear life. And maybe Fred VanVleet would hit a bailout 3-pointer from 27, 28 feet away. And this one, look, they trailed late in regulation. They trailed by 6 in the first overtime. They trailed in the second overtime. Every time they came back to either tie or take a lead. Like, they were able to generate offense, and some of it comes down to, even if KD's struggling, he still has a lot of gravity. He draws a lot of attention because he's Kevin Durant. He's an all-star, a future Hall of Famer. Some of it's just Amin Thompson and Alperen Sengun improving and getting better. But I just thought the biggest deficiency for this team a year ago, when it got to clutch time, they just did not have a guy, or they didn't have a consistent way that they could generate offense sustainably. They did in this one. It wasn't enough to win, in large part because, SGA equaled it out on the other end, and so you sort of have to tip your hat. But offensively, even with those KD mistakes, even with him not closing the game out, the team overall looked far more functional in generating crunch time offense, even on the road, even against a really good defense, than they did a year ago. At some point it's got to translate to wins. We don't want to do too many of these silver linings after losses podcasts, but in the big picture, when you look at how they lost games and where they struggled the most last year, I did think they looked a lot better in the opener.
Yeah, speaking of clutch, let us know about your content. I know clutch is playing a part of your content recently, right?
Yeah, so still, writing, blogging, all that good stuff at USA Today, rocketsbar.usatoday.com. But I've also started doing these post-game live shows with Dave Harsey, editor of Clutch Fans. Those are streaming on the Clutch Fans YouTube page. I don't know if we'll do those for every game, especially the late night West Coast ones, but we're experimenting with it more. Dave's been a legendary figure in the Rockets content community for a while, and with the team being as good as they are, he wants to get back in the game a little bit more. So yeah, we'll see where it leads. Not sure exactly how often we're going to do it, but Dave's a good friend of mine. He's been a huge figure in the Rockets online content community for really 30 years now. So I'm glad to bring him out of semi-retirement. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, still Rockets Wire is the primary. It's where I do the writing. But the stuff with Clutch Fans, the Rockets Launch Pod, the newly renamed version of the Logger Line, trying to do lots of different things. The bottom line is, with the team as good as it is and with this much enthusiasm, we just want to give fans more avenues to, consume content and talk about this, what should be an awesome team.
Before we go, just want to thank our friends at FanDuel, FanDuel.com. Check it out. Thanks so much, Ben. Always good to see you. And M-I-Z?
Z-O-U. Beat Vandy.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.